from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
It's okay if it's hard to find the words to express how you feel.
It's okay to feel like you just want to become someone else.
It's okay if you're panicking over an inability to control your life right now.
It's okay to have trouble maintaining your normal routine while staying home.
It's okay if you're feeling more cynical than usual.
It's okay if you want to curse more than you usually do.
It's okay to wear your favorite tank top several days in a row.
It's okay to miss your job.
It's okay to just stay quiet.
It's okay to be depressed.
It's okay to talk to your cats like they understand what you're saying.
It's okay not to feel the most fabulous right now.
It's okay.
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 Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 26th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, mental health in Nebraska. We have two guests joining us to talk more about it via Zoom. The first is Dr. Kenneth Zuha. Dr. Zuha is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at UNMC. And Kathy Seacrest. Kathy is the regional administrator for Region 2 Human Services. Thank you both and welcome to the program. Dr. Zuha, I want to start with you. How do you define mental health?
There's so many different ways to define mental health. And first, just thank you very much for inviting me and Kathy to be here today to talk about just an important topic. You know, mental health, it includes so many different aspects of us as human beings, including like emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Our mental health affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It really determines how we handle stress and relate to others, make healthy choices, and just walk through our day from the moment we get up in the morning to the moment we sleep, and how we sleep so many times. It's just such an important part at just every stage of life, also from childhood through adulthood into senior life. And so it really encompasses every part of our life.
Okay, what percentage of us doctors suffers from some form of mental illness?
Our statistics show that about 1 in 5 adults suffer from any mental illness in a given year. And then about 1 in 5 youth from 13 to 18 years of age at some point in their life or currently have a serious and developing mental illness. And about 1 in 25 adults lives with a really serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia or psychosis. And so it's very common. That's, 1 out of 5 is quite a few folks.
Okay, what are some other, you mentioned a few, but what are some other examples of mental illness?
I think the most common ones that we think about are depression. We hear about depression a lot, and anxiety. There's numerous different anxiety disorders, including generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder. Bipolar disorder is considered a mental illness. The serious and persistent mental illnesses like schizophrenia or psychosis, also considered mental illnesses. Those are some examples of the ones that we think about most commonly, and there's different kind of variations of those as well.
What causes mental illness? I know that's just a loaded question, but what are some of the contributing factors here?
Well, that's a lot of factors. I really like how you said that. That was really great. There's really no single cause for mental illness. And there's a number of factors that we think about. And probably the one that we're looking at a lot in our pediatric world is adverse childhood experiences, trauma or history of abuse. And those can be significant when we think about mental illness. Experiences related to ongoing medical diseases, chronic diseases such as cancer or diabetes, asthma, COPD, there's biological factors, and so genetics plays a big role in mental illness, as well as chemical imbalances in the brain. Use of alcohol and other substances are contributing factors and a very important part of this conversation. And then also just having feelings of loneliness or isolation, just being separated and away from our people. And so our pandemic really affected mental health throughout the world because of the isolation and the loneliness folks felt during that time.
All right. Another important question, especially for the folks on the outside looking in. Warning signs, doctor. How do people know that there might be something, wrong? Not just those of us on the outside looking in, but the person themselves. How do they know that there's something going on?
Again, just a really great question. I think that, for the people watching those we love, oftentimes that's just changes in daily routine, alterations in emotional responses, maybe more irritable or more isolated, oftentimes changes in like hygiene or eating practices or sleeping practices, changes in ability to work or go to school, for instance, are all kind of things that are potential symptoms of having a mental illness. I think a lot of times people express too that they just feel very anxious, or they feel very sad or very down, or just feel like something's wrong. For people who have a mental illness, a lot of times it can be a difficult sort of description. Just again, feeling like something is just off. A lot of people just do feel sad if they have depression, and can also be very irritable during that time when we think about like adolescence in that realm of depression, being very anxious. I think a lot of that is looking at also, are those feelings or are those sensations creating difficulties for you in your life? Is it causing you not to be able to function in your family? Is that changing your ability to work or your ability to get to your appointments or your daily obligations? And are you really struggling just to, for instance, get out of bed in the morning? Sleep changes are really big signs of having a substance use disorder, a mental health diagnosis. And then also eating changes can be seen as well, either eating more or less than usual. So, a lot of kind of different symptoms, and not everybody has all of those symptoms. And it can vary from person to person, kind of where things are at surrounding that.
Thank you, doctor. I want to bring Kathy Seacrest into the conversation now. Kathy, we've identified maybe that there's something that's just not right, and yet many people opt not to seek help. Why is that?
I think lots of reasons. Culturally, we're taught to basically fend for ourselves, take care of ourselves, pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, those kinds of messages. I think more and more, though, in the world today, it has become more acceptable to ask for help. And the sooner someone asks for help, the better, because then we can, like any disease, treat it early, and people can get on with having a happy and okay life.
Okay, Kathy, we hear the word stigma quite a bit when it comes to mental health. First of all, kind of tell us what that is in this realm, right? And why it's such a roadblock.
Well, I think that we grow up not knowing about mental health, and so we kind of immediately think negatively if someone has a mental illness, and we think it means things that it may mean or it may not mean. But in my experience in rural areas, people are more and more willing now. And I think it's because it's talked about so much more. Just even your show, Kathy, people are willing to really take a look at it, and in the process of that, change how they think about it.
All right. And of course, how they talk about it. Language, so very, very important. I think we have so many well-intended individuals out there who want to be helpful, but sometimes we just can't find the right words. Talk about language, Kathy, as we put this graphic up for our viewers, and why it matters so much here.
Well, I think, we have to get away from labeling people. And so we talk about persons with substance use disorder or an addiction. We can talk about people with a disease rather than calling them that disease. And that's so important because they are, that's be as inclusive as possible and as affirming as possible in the language that we use.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Zouhal, we're going to come back to you here. One of the most important things that we can do is start a conversation like anything else on the right foot, right? So I think there are people out there who want to say something, but they're just having trouble getting started with initiating that conversation in a way that the person may be open to receiving that message. So maybe give us some tips on how to start a conversation.
Thanks for that question. I think stigma has a lot actually to do with people reaching out and asking questions. Stigma so much has to do with, did you cause your disease? And like Kathy said, can you control it? Can you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps or just use your willpower to make that go away? And I think first, just kind of thinking about mental health and substance use disorders as disease processes, as alterations with how our bodies are working, rather than just having a poor self-will or your morals are not good enough, or you just don't have the character to be able to manage life. And so I think we need to pull away from that and continue to have that conversation so people understand this in a different light. I think approaching folks surrounding mental health or substance use disorders as well, considered part of this mental health question, really involves looking at things that are objective. And so coming to people with things like, usually you're the first one here, or usually you're right on time, or and here's a couple of times when you were a little bit late maybe, or usually you're very happy and greet everybody, and we've noticed that you aren't doing that as well, or maybe a little bit more quick with your answers and not as conversant. And instead of just saying, what's wrong with you, or how come you can't snap out of it, it's really, the conversation is, we're really concerned about you. Is there something that you would like to talk about? Or is there something I can do to help? And I really think that's the conversation, is having these sort of objective kind of things that you can look at to say, this is why I'm concerned. And again, not labeling people. I thought what Kathy said was really good, not labeling people, but really looking at, people suffering. Is there something you're worried about, or is there something you're struggling with, or do you want to talk? Is there anything I can do to help? And I think that's more likely to open the conversation and have people talk about that, versus saying, I think you're depressed, or I think you're drinking too much, or those types of accusations. And I really feel like people too who have these stigmatized disease processes are pretty defensive about some of those things and worried about how other people are going to see them. And so when they're being kind of saying, you're drinking too much, I think that just puts up walls and defenses, versus, is there anything you're really struggling with? Or is there something that I can do to help, or we can do to help you? I really think that opens up the conversation in a really empathetic and compassionate way, treating somebody as if you would, that you're concerned that their breathing is wrong, or that maybe they might have diabetes because of their drinking patterns, or going to bath, just the things we think about when we think about the medical diseases that we worry about our friends and our loved ones, and really seeing the mental health diagnoses and the substance use disorders in the same exact way, and just approaching that as you would a friend or a family member who you're worried about a medical diagnosis.
Can I ask you, that is such great advice. If somebody goes down that path and they open it the way you're suggesting, But then things start to kind of go awry in that discussion. At what point does that person who initiated, that person who cares so much, at what point do they say, time out, let's back up and try this again, or maybe just resume it at another time? If they get into that situation, doctor, help us with how we proceed from there.
Also really good, and I really think it's just so individual about how we approach folks and the people that we're approaching, and an understanding of who they are and how they respond. You always have the ability, if the person you're talking with gets upset or angry or whatever, is just to say, I'm really sorry that I upset you. I didn't mean to. I was just really worried about you and your health. And please know that I'm just here at any time if you would like to talk. And then you just kind of pull away at that time. And I think that's a one way of kind of responding to that, and maybe thinking about how you might interact with somebody who's not maybe taking this information in a way that you have expected, or in a different way. Yeah, I think we have to really remember that it's real scary for folks to have mental health, for some of them, and what that could mean for them, or how people might see them. And so it can be really difficult to talk about that, or to open up about some of those things. And so I really feel like people will have a gut sort of feeling about when you've maybe said something or when to back away. But I really think that part of that is also just leaving the conversation open and giving opportunities to come back to that at any point.
Okay, and hopefully by opening that door, doctor, they will then be open to the possibility of treatments. What treatments are available these days for mental illness?
I'm so grateful for my colleagues in the psychiatry department in around our state, who have done such a great job of teaching us about these things. There are really good medications available to treat a lot of the mental health diagnoses, as well as the substance use disorder diagnoses. And the medicines can be very effective. There's not one that works great for everybody, and it takes some trials sometimes to do that. But also, in addition to the medications, are numerous different therapy approaches. And again, I want to have just a shout out to my therapy colleagues that I have the honor of working with, and what they've taught us about those. But there's many different therapy techniques that work very well for patients who have anxiety or depression, and individual therapy techniques and group therapy techniques. And so all of those are available. I think it's really important to remember too that patients or family members sometimes hit a crisis spot where they have thoughts about harming themselves, or become at a point where they need emergency help, and that's available to go to a physician or emergency room. And some of our communities have emergency rooms specifically for psychiatry emergencies, but that those services are available. And I know you're going to put up the hotline numbers here at the end that I think are really important to have available to talk about those as well. And so there's a lot available that's and I think the really important thing to recommend or recognize is that treatment works and it's effective, and people get better, and that we have to really understand that, and not be afraid to ask for that help, and to accept the help when it's presented to us.
Thank you. Before we go back to Kathy, I do want to ask you a question pertaining to telehealth. Obviously has been hugely instrumental in what you're doing. Yeah. Tell us about that.
So telehealth, I mean, it's really thinking about just treatment of substance use disorders. It's really provided treatment for patients who otherwise would not be available or be able to get treatment. Many of our counties in Nebraska do not have a specialist for mental health, medical for mental health, so psychiatry or nurse practitioners or PAs that are specialized in mental health diagnoses, and being able to access those folks by telehealth, or being able to treat patients in rural areas or away from the specialty care by telehealth is huge. Saves patients the time and the expense, and the availability. I think that really it also increases access as well, and allows patients to have access to providers that they wouldn't have access to in the past. I also think that telehealth has increased our ability to talk with and train our primary care providers, who are really the front line of this care. They're the ones that know our patients the best, and have this understanding of them, and really provide a lot of this care. I think having the telehealth availabilities of not only training but also seeing patients, I think is really, really important. It gives access to folks in the rural parts of our country, and there's a lot of them who wouldn't have access to that care otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, folks like you in Grand Island, I mean, I would imagine this plays into that. The doctor mentioned counties. We're going to put a map up for our viewers, and you tell us what we're seeing in terms of regions here.
Yeah, in Nebraska, we're divided into 6 regions, behavioral health regions. Region 1 is the Scottsbluff area. Region 2, where I'm from, is North Platte, McCook, Lexington area. And then 4 is up north and to the east. And 3 is Central, Kearney, Grand Island. 5 is Lincoln, and then the rural areas. And then 6 obviously has our largest population, but fewest counties. Okay. And all of these regions are dedicated to getting services, and we contract with providers to provide those services on a sliding fee scale, so that regardless of ability to pay, anybody in Nebraska can access help. And that's so important. And all of the regions also have crisis response teams to deal with the crises and or to answer if 988 needs somebody on site, we can do that. And so it's just a wonderful example of how to organize a state to be very inclusive and to take that stigma away by making it very available. And I think back to Dr. Zuha's comments about telehealth has helped reduce stigma as well, because folks can sit in their own home and talk to a licensed person.
Okay, and you're in Region 2, Kathy, and you've been doing this a while. So talk to us a little bit about Region 2 in just the few minutes we have remaining, and why you do what you do.
I do what I do because I think it's incredibly important that people be listened to and find help as quickly and easily as they can. And I think in our area, we have attempted to make access quick and easy, and then get people to the right thing. You know, not everybody that calls needs A. Some people need B. Some people need C. So we just want to make sure that what that person needs. And also back to Dr. Zuha, you know, by active listening, we can really hear the needs of the person. And if you address those needs, that stigma will disappear, because people are very willing to take help if they feel that someone hears them.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy Seacrest, joining us, Region 2. I want to go back to the doctor here, maybe with a final question. Doctor, as you're listening to this conversation and have been so gracious to be a part of it, is there anything that we did not address here today that you think is really important for people to know in terms of mental health in Nebraska?
Well, I'm grateful to be here and so appreciative. I think really we've talked about that today, is just education about the importance that these diseases, mental health diagnoses, are medical diagnoses and have treatment. And it's more than just willpower, and more than just being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and that there's no shame or harm in that, and then it's okay to not be okay. I think talking with our kids about these processes, I think, is very important in prevention. It is a valuable part of all of this as well. And the final thing is that really just connection is such an important part of our health, our mental health, and connection with others and with family and with friends. And just to, as we come out of our pandemic, jumping back into those connections and into life with our friends and our family is such an important part of all of this. So I'm just really grateful for the opportunity. The final thing I wanted to talk about is just the substance use disorders. We mentioned those a little bit, but the co-occurring substance use and mental health diagnoses are so common, and that we have to treat both of them at the same time. And if we don't do that, it's just difficult for folks to get better. I hope that people reach out to their primary care doctors and their providers in their community to ask for help when they're struggling.
Talking with Dr. Kenneth Zuha and Kathy Seacrest today about mental health in Nebraska. I want to thank you both so much for sharing your time and expertise and stories, and for all the good that you're doing in our communities in Nebraska. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, you bet. Folks wanting more information can go to National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 988, nebraskamed.com. Finally, dhhs.ne.gov. As we close, a look at Memorial Park in Omaha is seen through the lens of Jerome Bradford, a junior at UNO. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.